Hi, folks. We're going to give everyone a minute to roll in. So get settled, get your coffees and teas, and we'll be starting shortly. While we're waiting, I'm curious to hear where everyone's from. So feel free to add your location in the chat. Where is everyone joining from today? Oh, amazing. We have some folks from Colombia, from the United States, all over kind of. Chicago, amazing. California. We really are very, very well distributed. Good to have all of you here. Okay, folks will keep rolling in, but we can perhaps get started. Super excited to have all of you here. Thank you for joining today's session of the Insight Loop. This is our first webinar episode from Looppanel, where we are talking to UX research leaders about challenges that we all face and solutions that we know actually work. Today's topic is something basically every researcher I've ever spoken to has dealt with at some point, which is the challenge between speed to insight and quality and rigor. I can see Kat like already face palming and being like, this is so real. So I'm really excited to dig in today. Before we jump in, I'll give a little bit of context about us at Looppanel. Looppanel is an AI-enabled analysis and repository solution. We help researchers analyze centralized search through their data 10 times faster. We think about this trade-off with speed and quality a lot, actually, because every time we're releasing a feature, like let's say auto tagging or global search, we think a lot about, hey, how do you bring in speed? How do you make things more efficient? Where does AI help, for example, but how do you still maintain that quality, that rigor, that control for the researcher? So I am really pumped for this session. Joining us today is Kat Gardner, Senior Director of Research at RocketMoney. Welcome, Kat. So excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I mean, also congratulations on your recent promotion. Folks, we should all take Kat's insights very seriously. She's clearly doing well. And Kat, on that note, I'd love to learn a little bit about your role, your company. Tell us about what you do.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm Kat Gardner. I am the Senior Director of Research at RocketMoney. I joined RocketMoney about 4 years ago as the first researcher on the team. They didn't have a research function at the time. And since then, we've grown from a team of one to now a team of six. So it's really great to see. And in case anyone's not aware, hasn't seen our commercials, RocketMoney, you might know us for our subscription awareness and subscription cancellation services, but we are a full service personal financial management application. So we offer a wide range of personal financial options, from budgets to automated savings to just kind of general spend tracking.
That's awesome. And I love to see that you actually built out the research team from 0 to 6 people. That's incredible because it's actually so hard to do, to build that foundation and that buy-in within an org. So excited to dig into your learnings today. But before we do have one question that we wanted to put out to start the session off with, something fun and a little less serious. And Kat, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask for your answer first. But reading the statement, what is something that the UX community might not like, you might get canceled for, but you believe? We're not actually going to cancel you, but I'm just curious to hear everyone's controversial opinions. And Kat, we'll start with you, and folks, put your hot takes in the chat as well.
Oh, geez, please don't come for me, chat. I think my hottest UX take is that democratization of research can be useful, but I think to a certain extent it undercuts some of the expertise that we bring to our craft.
That's a good one. That's a nice spicy take to start us off. I don't know, do you agree with Kat? Do you have thoughts, different takes? Keep dropping them in the chat. We'll jump into those as we go. Talissa at least has, okay, many agreements from Kat for your take there. So I
And
don't
breathe a sigh of relief.
I don't think that that's that controversial. Um, But we will jump right into the actual meat of today's session. Today we'll be covering four things: the challenge. So what does it look like when you're struggling with speed and rigor within your organization, when you have that tension? What are the symptoms? How does it impact your team and your business? From there, we'll actually go into the solution, obviously, what everyone's excited for. So, Kat, I know you tried many different things. So we'll talk about the four steps that actually worked. Based on Kat's learnings, we do have downloadable resources, templates. We'll talk through those with you folks briefly. And my favorite part, we will be talking through Q&A. So we'll save some time for questions. If anyone has any, please keep dropping them in the chat or in the question. I think there's a question pop-up, and we will be saving some time to come back to those. All right, that is enough from me. Without further ado, Kat, I wanted to get started on the challenge. Like, when you were struggling with this challenge of speed to insight versus rigor, what were the symptoms? How did you know that this was a challenge?
Yeah, so Rocket Money is at this really critical juncture, I would say, where we're not quite a startup. When I joined, we were only maybe 100 people. We've grown in size since then, but we're also not yet a giant company. And so we really wanted to maintain that agility and speed that we felt made startup culture great, but we also now serve millions of users. And at that scale, every single decision and product launch and an experiment that we run could have a much greater consequence for the business than when we were a small company and could kind of just throw the spaghetti at the wall. And we were starting to see really this tension where our product teams still wanted to be able to move quickly to test and learn, but they also wanted to know that the decisions that they were making were really the right decisions, that they were rooted in customer needs and pain points. And so we really started to hit this tension point where like good research often takes time, and it was time that our product teams didn't necessarily want to give us. So we were struggling really to meet the timelines of these stakeholders while also not compromising on the quality. I know you said Critica, it's a classic researcher problem. And so we started to get requests that are like, we need this answer by next Monday. And I'm like, well, it's Tuesday, and that's just not going to be feasible. And you start to worry about, oh no, am I going to get left behind? Am I going to get cut out of the process entirely? When you start to hit that point where people want things faster than you can provide, how do you meet them halfway?
Yeah, and that, like you said, it sounds like something that everyone's probably faced. I don't know if folks in the chat, you've had different symptoms, different ways you figured, hey, this seems like a friction point. We'd love to hear from what everyone is kind of experiencing as well. But I guess, Kat, let's say this was a challenge where sometimes the product team was making decisions without research, or there was this tension. What was the impact of that? Like, what was how did that affect your team? How did that affect even the broader organization or the company as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it both in my team and in the business. So my team was definitely feeling frustrated. They want to put good work out into the world and work that they're proud of. And when they feel like they're rushed or they have to cut corners, that's just not good for anybody's morale. And likewise, on the other side, the business, they were emphasizing velocity. They still wanted to move quickly, but they also were risk averse. Like they don't want to make the wrong decision. And the cost of building the wrong thing could be really high in terms of customer sentiment or business resources. And so we wanted to avoid getting into this cycle that I had seen happen at other companies where the product team wants to move fast. They see research as maybe a little bit of a slowdown or a blocker. And so they decide, well, I'm just going to build it. I'm just going to throw something out the door and hope that it works. And, both sides of that aren't necessarily great. If it succeeds, that's awesome for the business, but kind of undercuts the value that research could bring. And if it fails, then the business has to spend a lot of time or money or other resources going back and, iterating or rebuilding entirely in some cases. So I really started to see this as like, okay, how can we solve this? How can we search for ways that we can still conduct the research we're proud of, really high quality, but work at the speed of business and meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I think no product stakeholder or no product team as a whole wants to be shipping a feature over 6 months that literally nobody uses. And it's shocking how frequently that happens. So that completely makes sense as the cost that you were facing. Now that you'd identified this challenge, what was the goal that you were trying to hit? What was the North Star?
Yeah, I mean, it's really these two items we have on the screen here. We really wanted to deliver insights at the speed the business needed without compromising on the quality and the belief that we had in our research. And ultimately, the end state, we wanted our product partners to see us as strategic enablers, that someone they want to bring in early because we add so much value and not a slowdown or a blocker to their overall product life cycle.
That makes a lot of sense. Be an enabler, not a blocker, be a true partner in that development process and be valued as such. So let's talk through solutions now. Again, I know you tried many different things. There was no silver bullet. There were kind of four separate steps that you had to implement to make this work within the org. Let's go over each one. And I wanted to start right at the front with the mindset shift. What did that look like? What changes did you have to make to enable the research team to be those enablers and to work collaboratively with the business as well?
Yeah, I think it is really important to stress that like I did not just magically come up with this perfect solution out of the gate. It did take some trial and error and some testing and learning, but I think really the mindset shift started with my team. First and foremost, I wanted to be sure that my team was bought into this because as researchers, we're always going to err on the side of rigor and process and quality. And I really had to help people get into the mindset of not letting perfect be the enemy of good enough and focusing on delivering those outcomes for the business. We didn't want to do bad research. We didn't want to do, garbage in, garbage out. But how could we do the work that we're proud of, but answering the most crucial questions and getting our product partners to the decisions they needed to make. So a lot of this really happened in setting up a bit more process on the front end and a bit more work in the kickoff stage to make sure that we're identifying those most crucial questions versus nice to haves. I'm sure we've all had those moments where our product partners say, oh, can I also have this and this and this? And it's like, maybe, but let's identify if what's blocking you from moving forward, and understanding what decisions that would inform. And this leads us to, really crafting those correct questions and fitting in other things where we can, but focusing on what's going to be most important for our partners. And this led us to implementing our second solution, which is what we call our one-way or two-way door framework. So this really helps us as a research team decide how hard we need to fight for time and an extra research period. So one-way doors are those really high impact or high visibility decisions that are going to be difficult to undo. So if I think about the RocketMoney business, that could be things like changing our budgeting model. That has implications across the app on how we visualize and show people data. But also, as in other businesses, launching a net new feature, something that you're going to spend maybe 6 months up to a year developing and launching. These are things that not only greatly impact the user experience, but also have a high degree of business resources behind them to implement. So in those cases, we really want to fight for the time and the focus on the precision. And we want to ensure that the business gets it right the first time and that they don't have to go back and iterate on kind of the core functionality of that product. On the other hand, two-way doors are kind of the opposite. They're those lower impact or easily reversible, easily testable decisions. And while we still want to get them right, the consequences of getting them wrong are maybe a little less. So in these cases, it's fine if we don't provide that intense depth of research. A little bit more of that general guidance is fine. So for an example here, on two-way doors, we really wanted to increase the number of people opting into biometric login on our application. So that's like Face ID or fingerprint ID. Because as a business, just we believe that this is an easier thing for users to do. It's faster, it's more secure. There's just a lot of reasons why we think it would be good. But we weren't totally sure why people wouldn't opt in to biometric login. And so we could have run a number of A/B tests trying to test maybe different language or different CTAs or other things on this screen. But we found, hey, we can just run a quick 10-question survey, gather some of the barriers for people who aren't opting in, gather the reasons why people who do use biometrics like to use it. And this allowed us to help our product partner hone in on just a little bit more limited set of hypotheses to test. There was maybe 20 different ideas that we had thrown out there of how we could improve biometric login opt-in rate. And we found that by doing this really quick and dirty kind of fast research that didn't need a lot of depth, we were able to narrow that down to maybe 3 or 4 things that we felt more confident in testing. So it's one of those things where, like, could we have done a multi-phase project there? Sure, we could do anything, but it would have been overkill, because this was one of those problems where, yes, some information helped us, but we didn't need 100% the right answer.
I love that analogy, and it looks like folks have maybe their own versions of what that looks like as well. So let's say you've figured out one-way, two-way door, and you've decided, okay, this is the model we're going with. How do you get those insights to your stakeholders? What were the changes that you made there as well?
Yeah, so that was kind of a lot on the upfront of our process. We also started to change a little bit more on the back end. So how can we help our product stakeholders get the answers they need as quickly as possible? And one of the KRs that we set out as a team last year, our key results, was in almost every project trying to get a top line out the door within 24 to 48 hours. So, generally within 2 business days or so. So we know our stakeholders had decisions to make, and we didn't want our research to kind of hold them back from making those decisions. So as we think back to that mindset shift, really identifying those critical questions up front, our top lines really focus on the biggest 2 to 5 insights from that research that map back to those key decisions. What do our product partners need to know to be able to move forward? And let's just deliver them those insights as quickly as possible. It isn't as important that they're nuanced or really in depth, but hey, you need to make decision A, here's your answer. So we're able to get them those basic answers really quickly, and then help them refine the concepts and give them more nuance once we finish up that full deliverable. But the struggle that we were also facing here, as research is a world of solving problems, but as researchers, we wanted more confidence in those early insights. I think we've all had those experiences where you're writing, maybe your early results or your early takeaways, and then as you spend a little more time with the data, you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't as prevalent as I originally thought, or maybe this one participant was just really passionate about it, but I'm not necessarily seeing it across everyone. And we wanted to be sure, if we were going to be moving fast, delivering these top lines, that the major themes we were putting out into the world were truly reflective of what we heard in research. So that actually led us to seeking out a little bit of new tooling, which is our next solution here. So the process change really helped us set up for success, but then we hit, like I said, this point where we were like, how do we analyze, especially qualitative research, much more quickly? Because, digging through hours of transcripts, trying to find exact quotes, it takes a lot of time to do right. And that was actually what led us to Looppanel. So we wanted something that would take away some of that manual labor associated with qualitative research. Again, like I said, things like hunting down quotes can take a while if you've done 12-hour-long interviews. And we wanted to be able to get to those insights a little more quickly and have the confidence that we were sending people down the right path. So like, for example, we recently had a project to better understand our brand value propositions, and it was a very big kind of exploratory project. We generally knew what people valued in our service, but we really wanted to quantify and lay out the whole landscape here. Looppanel really helped us get our analysis 80% of the way completed with things like the AI auto tagging, comments and themes. It just helped us speed up and spend a little bit more time doing the kind of like fun part of research, digging into that nuance, making sure that we had distinction between these themes, and just kind of moving ahead. Similarly, we also really love the uploading the CSV file here. I love running surveys, but I'm always hesitant to put some of the open-ended questions into a survey, because manual coding those questions is a bummer. It's just not fun. It's not fun to do. And now we can just upload CSVs here and get those themes really quickly and be able to, it links to the quotes that we find directly. So it really helps us get those breakdowns in an hour rather than me spending my afternoon coding 400 open-ended responses. So we get that richness of the qualitative data at scale.
What are you saying, Kat? You don't want to spend all day coding open ends like that? Come on. No, but I love that, and I love those examples. I completely I think everything that you've shared today has been super valuable. And on that note, I did want to share with everyone, we will be putting out a Speed to Insight starter kit based on these insights with decision frameworks. So someone talked about the one-way and two-way door and how do you prioritize, helping you think through what those look like, the top line templates. We'll be sharing all of this over email with you folks. So please do keep an eye out on your inbox, and you should receive those shortly as well. And now for my favorite part of today's session is the questions. So we wanted to open up to everyone here. I know a couple of people have been dropping things in the chat as we've gone along, so we'll take those as well. But if anyone has questions based on what we've talked about or other scenarios that we maybe haven't touched on, this is supposed to be a sort of collaborative space. So let's jump into some of those questions. Varun, do you want to tell us which ones have come up?
Well, there's a bunch, and I don't really want to choose. But for example, Brent says, how often do you have to double back on solution 3?
So top lines, how
This is the top
often
line,
do you
yeah.
have to go? So actually, Brent, could you clarify on that one? Is that, do you mean if I put out the top lines, do I have to go back and relook at them and fix them up? Or maybe we can get a little, or Kat, did you get that question?
Yeah, I think both these questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A are related to top lines. So Brent, to your question on how often you have to double back, I'm guessing you're referencing like, have we ever had to renege on maybe a solution that we had put out there or a theme we had found? I don't think that happens very often. What I see more frequently is we capture the high level takeaway, but maybe don't add as much detail. And I would say that that's just a trade-off you kind of make with those top lines is you know, feeling confident in overall what you're seeing, but adding a little bit more nuance can kind of change the scope of the top lines insights that you're sharing. But I don't know that I can think of an exact time where we've had to say, hey, we sent something incorrect to you. Usually if we're putting it out in a top line, we feel pretty confident that it's reliable here. And as far as Nelson, the 24 to 48 hour rule, did decision makers normally make their decision right away, or did they wait for additional nuance? Oftentimes we'll see that our designers will start designing with those decisions pretty immediately. We move fairly fast clip. So there are situations where we could have extended that duration. It's not a hard and fast rule for every single piece of research, but something we try to aim for. But it depends on the problem. There are some, I would say, meteor issues, more one-way door things where the top line is really just to guide early discussions, and it's truly once the full deliverable is ready that that people end up designing, making final decisions and final choices.
There's one, go ahead, Varun. Did you want to jump in?
Sorry, I think you saw the same one that I'm seeing. There's
Yeah.
one from Kel who says, how do we balance the speed and quality of feedback? And for example, when running a survey, the quality is a bit shallow. So how do you mitigate for that?
Yeah. Again, just like such a classic research problem here. I don't know that there's an exact right answer. Sometimes what we'll do is, again, thinking about how can we get you maybe a flashlight in the dark if we can't find the full light system yet. We'll sometimes do a quick survey and get some of those open-ended responses. And yes, maybe they're not as nuanced or as detailed as they could be. But sometimes at the end of that survey, we'll ask people, hey, would you want to participate in future research with us? And get, you know, a little bit more depth from people where we're like, this is a really interesting answer or a take on this problem. Could we pull them into a quick 30-minute interview? And try and do that as quickly as possible so that we don't lose their kind of motivation to participate and to chat with us. But I see sort of those surveys as maybe a like step one. And if we decide we need more detail or nuance, we can then seek out other forms that have a little bit more depth.
There seems to be one more that's come in from Francis. So I'll read it out for you, Kat. What are your thoughts about the changing nature of research, changing the nature of the research practice to be less reactive to requests and instead run a more continuous program of longitudinal research to track UX indicators across key jobs to be done? This one's an intense one. This way the team can stay ahead of requests rather than always being in reactive mode. Very relevant question. And Kat, have you thought through this one? Do you have any strong takes here?
Yeah, I mean, Francis, this is a great question. And I will be totally honest with this crew. Being in the startup world, we still are, I would say, maybe a little bit more reactive than I would like to be. So I don't know that I have all the answers here. But it is something that we want to move towards, is being more proactive, getting ahead of those stakeholder requests, really trying to see what are the trends in the market or in the financial space. So that we can say this is where we think that the puck is headed, and try and get ahead of that. But there are always, the fires that are going to pop up, the things that are going to happen. I feel like the reactive nature is always going to be a part of our job. But I agree, Francis, the more we can kind of get ahead of those requests and really be guiding the product roadmap, the better setup we are for success. And I think the more value that you end up seeing in the research organization.
But that was an incredible question. That was very, very thoughtful. Any final questions from folks? We'll give you a second to drop them in, but those were some incredible ones. And Kat, really helpful answers, solutions, resources. So thank you so much for taking the time for that. Someone asked in the chat, we will be sharing the recording. We'll be sharing all the resources after the fact. So if anyone wants to look back at this or reference that, we'll be sharing that out as well. Okay, it looks like maybe no final questions at the moment. If anyone does, you can also, I think, Varun at the beginning put our LinkedIn's in, so you can add us, DM us if you have additional questions or things you want to talk through. But that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you so much, Kat, for taking the time, for sharing what I know are hard-won lessons from your time at RocketMoney. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join. And look out in your inboxes for those resources, for the recordings, and do keep coming, stay in touch. This is all part of the community effort, so we're excited to keep seeing everyone.